I'm stuck at home or something. I
That's
spent,
true.
uh, I think it was about an hour yesterday with NBC.
Mm-hmm.
NBC, I forget what else they called it, but it's a young woman who's putting together a show of all kinds of women doing different things.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. And so I think I talked to her about an hour, and she's
Wow.
taking NBC. I mean, she works for NBC, but she's submitting it to the higher ups to see if they want to do this as a show. And
Oh, neat.
yeah, so she wanted me to talk to her about the fun things and the sad things, and
Right. Well, this may be somewhat similar then.
yeah, it may be.
It might feel a little bit like deja vu.
Good.
Oh, yeah. And so I'm recording now just so I don't forget to hit the record button. Um I want to just let our listeners get to know you a little bit and go back to even your childhood, how you were raised and who your influences were. I would love to hear about the period of time when you first started in law enforcement and what that was like back in the 60s. And is there anything that you don't want to talk about or anything I have some ideas of the questions I want to ask, but I also like to make it feel conversational so that if,
Hmm.
it may be that as you talk about something, we may go off on a tangent depending on
Right.
where we go with it. But is there anything that you do want to highlight or that you don't want to highlight so I can make sure we get to it or don't get to it?
Well, I think that there's such a belief system out there that women can't do this work. And
Hmm.
that's ridiculous because we're
Right.
bred to do this work,
Yes.
to help people, take care of people, help solve problems, And so I think that dealing with that, yes, you can do it. It's
Mhm.
you see on TV. It's
Okay.
it's not
And
the, you know,
mhm.
sirens blasting and rolling
Right.
murder scenes all the time or something. It's not like that at all.
Right, right. And I know that you had when you left Portland and transitioned, that it had to have been an interesting and difficult time. Do you think talking about that part of your career and your life would are you okay with that? And do you want to talk
Mhm.
about that? And do you think that would be helpful for the listeners to kind of hear what you had gone through?
Yeah, I don't think we need to go into that in any depth as to all the
For sure.
details of it, but the fact that it happened, yeah.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
what do you do after that? If you
Mhm.
reach your dream job and then all of a sudden it's taken away,
Right.
you know, then what do you
Okay. Okay. So then I'll just ask about some of the obstacles and challenges you met along the way, and I'll just let you talk about it as much or as little as you want.
do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So then excuse me, and make sure I get this frog out of my throat.
Yes. I have the
um
same problem. I'm kind of nasally this morning.
Yeah, the allergies have not been good.
No.
Not good to have allergies during this time. So then we'll just kind of let it flow, and I will have the audio edited on the back end. And so if there's anything that you say where you say, hold on, back up, I want to start this over, you can. I may do that. I'm a fledgling podcaster. This is new to me. And then at the end, I like to wrap up with a single piece of advice to women who either want to do what you want to do or just similarly want to get into a very male dominated field. And then I like to give people an idea of where they can find you online if they want to keep up with what you're doing.
Okay.
Okay, so
That'd
that's
be
what
good.
I'll wrap up with. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So then we'll pause for a second. I will have, at the time we start the interview, I will have done a pre-recorded or a separately recorded introduction of you based on the
Okay.
whatever bio you send me. I'll make a synopsis from that. So
Okay. That
okay. All
sounds
right.
good.
Just a moment of pause, and then we'll start.
All right.
Hello, Penny, or I should say Chief Penny. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Good morning. It's
Good morning.
it's a beautiful morning, so I'm looking forward to this.
Wonderful. Well, I told the listeners a little bit about your background and all of the wonderful and amazing things that you've done. But I always like to ask folks how they got started, what their childhood was like, who were your major influences, and what led you down the path of getting into law enforcement and eventually becoming a leader within law enforcement.
It's an interesting thing because when I was young, I mean, I'm 78 now. So I was being raised in the 50s. And it was kind of an idyllic childhood, I think. You know, I had mom and dad and two brothers and a sister, and I'm the oldest. So they tried everything out on me. and but we had a huge extended family. They all lived in Lansing, Michigan, and we had picnics and parties, and we always did everything together. And that's so unusual today. You know, people don't understand how it was, but it was really good. And what I loved about the way my parents raised us is that there were no gender roles in our family, which is really unusual for the 50s. And so the boys and girls both had to wash the dishes. The boys and girls both had to rake the leaves. There was not well, the boys do that and the girls do this. And I think that set a strong base for me that I can do everything and I should do everything. And there shouldn't be things I'm shut out of or pushed into. And so that was a really healthy way to grow up. And my parents both came out of families that had a lot of problems like a lot of people's parents do. My mom was raised by her mom and her alcoholic father. Mm. And that was a real struggle for her. She was the oldest child too. And he was a plumber. And he would go out and do plumbing. Then he'd take a fifth of Jim Beam as payment, money for food or anything. Yeah. So my mother had to be really strong and, go out and collect money from his customers and all of that. So she was a very strong woman. And she had really high hopes for me. And when we first started out, she wanted me to be a model. I didn't want to be And my father also was from a family that was broken up by alcoholism, and his father died when my was 16. So, and he was the second oldest one. So he and his brother made a deal. His brother would go to college if my dad would go to work and bring in the money for the family. So the brother could go to college. And then once the brother got out of college, my dad would go to college.
Wow.
They'd work out that way. Yeah. My dad worked and the brother went to college and then he came out and got a good job. Excuse me. And so both of my parents had to struggle, but they both had high hopes for all their kids. And when I graduated from high school in 1960, there were just a few jobs available for women: nurse, teacher, secretary, or wife and mother. And I didn't want to sign up for any of those. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I thought, okay, I'll be a secretary and I'll be a really great secretary. And my boss will take me on trips, when he's going on important business. That was my whole career goal. And then in my beginning of my senior year, they had a career day at school where you could go to the police department and see what they did. So I signed up to go, not because I wanted to be a police officer, but because I wanted to get out of school for the day.
What a happy accident, huh?
Exactly, exactly. And that was in Lansing, Michigan. And they happened to have a woman officer there.
Wow.
And they assigned me to spend the day with her. And wow, that did it. I mean, she took me out with her, showed me how she did her work. She worked mainly with juveniles in plain clothes, and talked to me about policing and the challenges. And I thought, wow, this is for me, excitement and all that kind of thing. And so she says, you've got to go to college. You have to get a degree because you're going to be a woman in a field where there aren't hardly any women. And if you want to prosper in that field, you have to have extra than the men. And she was right. So I got my degree, met my husband in college, got married, and then we moved to Oregon because our professors, one of our professors became the undersheriff of Multnomah County out there and said, we have jobs, so come out.
Wow.
So we did. And I wanted to get away from Michigan winters. I hated Michigan winters. And so we moved to Oregon, and they hired my husband as a deputy. And then they decided they couldn't hire me too because they'd already hired my husband, and they shouldn't have a husband and wife working together.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So that was my first experience. And then fortunately, the city of Portland was hiring. And that was the best place for me because it was bigger and way more professional. You get into, when you work in a big city like Portland, you get into everything. I mean, not just you do the same thing every day. And that's what I loved about police work. You never knew what you were going to do when you got to work. It could be a quiet, boring day, and you can't wait for the day to end, Or you could be involved in something that's so complicated, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to stay alive,
Right.
Those don't happen very often, thankfully. So I loved it. I just loved it. And after I'd been there a few years, I had my son, Brian. And that was, I thought I had it made, had a nice husband, had a beautiful son, had a nice job, lived in a nice home. Thought, wow, doesn't get any better than this.
So you must have said, this is it. I have made it.
I did. Little did I know. And then things started becoming apparent to me, like, why is it that the men who are doing the same work I'm doing are making more money than me and have a college degree and they don't? And the union, well, we didn't really have much of a union at that time. Nobody would do anything about it. And so finally, I went to work helping form a union. But I told them the only way I would do it is if they would guarantee women's rights, equal pay and that kind of thing. Oh, yes, of course we will. They didn't. And so we got a union, and I was working in what was called the Women's Protective Division, which was, we work on all cases involving women and girls, runaways, shoplifters, battered wives, abused children. Yeah, I became a expert in child abuse. And then I had my own baby, and I couldn't take it anymore. The emotional, you see things as a police officer most people don't ever see.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And so then I would go home to my own baby, and just pick him up and hold him and love him and just get so upset about the poor babies that were being so horribly abused or murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't take, I was going to have to quit. And but I met a man named Leo Miller, who was the prime one behind getting the union going. And he started talking to me about feminism. And I was flabbergasted, because I hadn't really paid that much attention to politics and feminism and all that kind of thing. And so he brought me a book called The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, which was like a call to arms to women back in the 60s when the book came out. And I read it, and it said everything I felt about the way my career was and my life was. And it really got me looking at things from a bigger point of view. And I think that a lot of times, as women especially, we get pushed into a role, and it's a narrow one, and we think that's all there is for us, and that's not true. And so the first thing I say to young women who are considering some kind of a field that is typically a man's field is you got to expand that. You cannot be a woman in a man's field. You've got to be a woman in a field that is open to men and women, and you've got to fight for it. Because in the year 2020, we still have careers that are closed to women, or very few women in them, and you're in one of them. And it's the only way to change them is to get more women in them. And I was one of 18 women in a police department that had 800 men.
Wow.
And, yeah, we had no voice.
Yeah.
And so I fought to get out of the women's division and to get into, Lil Miller wanted me to come to work for him as a planner, researcher. Planning and research was the name of the division. And I wanted away from emotional stuff with kids and everybody else. I was tired of seeing all of that. So I applied, and he selected me, and the chief said, no, she is a woman. She belongs in the women's division. She can't go there. And I was really upset. And I thought, how unfair, I have a college degree in police administration. First one hired by my department that had a degree in police administration. And they wouldn't let me out of the women's division. And so I was so tired of the emotional toll it was taking on me. So I decided I was going to go see the mayor. And I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. So I walked up the street to the mayor's office and told the mayor's secretary that I wanted to see him about a personal matter. And she let me see him. Okay. So I went in and I was telling him about, the women's division and making less money than the men and having to have a college degree. And now I really wanted to get into this other part of policing. And he listened to me very politely. And when I got done talking, he said, there's nothing I can do. And I said, of course there's something you can do. You're in charge of the police department. You're in charge of the police chief. You can call him and tell him to move me into that division. And he said, no, I can't do that. And I was just so deflated. And I started to walk out of his office, and I turned around and I said, if you don't transfer me out of the women's division, I'm going to sue you. And I struck.
Did you think of that at the moment, or was that part of your plan walking in?
That was not part of my plan. I don't even know where that came from. And when the words came out of my mouth, I was so shocked that I had said that. And I thought, by the time I get back to the police department, I'm going to be fired. I have to think of a new career. Excuse me. I mean, to deal with allergies.
No problem.
So,
Absolutely.
so I get back to the police department and there's a phone call from Leo Miller. And he's laughing. And he says, what did you just do? And I said, I asked the mayor to transfer me. And he says, well, you're transferred. He said, come on down, let's talk about it. And I told him what I did. And he said, oh my gosh. He says, you got a lot of grit, girl. So I worked there, and it was such a relief getting away from all the emotion and everything. And then I really got to get into some of the issues that needed to be addressed on the police department. You know, one of them was, when do you shoot? You know, because we are having too many shootings.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a policy on when you're allowed to shoot. And I wrote a policy on, we put water bumpers on the police cars because somebody wanted to try that out. And then we evaluated that. It was a complete disaster. And
What are water bumpers?
Instead of a regular bumper on the front of your car, there's a big rubber thing that's filled with water. So if you hit something, it gives, and the car doesn't get damaged. But what it does is it bursts and you get water. And if you don't keep it filled all the way, when you turn a corner, kind of pushes the car too far. And it was a disaster. We decided we weren't going to do that. And anyway, during all of this, and I'm excited about my job, and you know, things are going really well, but not at home. And my husband made a deal with me, very much like my dad and his brother. My husband said, how about if I go get my master's degree, and then when I get done, you can go get yours. Like, okay. And so that meant we were going to live on one salary instead of two. And it just didn't work out. I mean, he kept taking leaves and not finishing his degree. You're supposed to finish a master's degree in two years. He took several years, and finally I said, hey, it's my turn. And he says, you know, we just can't afford to have you do that. Oh. And so I left that marriage with my son. And by this time, I was in love with my boss. And he left his wife, and I left my husband. And we were going to get married, and then we just never did. We were together for years, but we just never got married. And so, and then he was helping me to, and I'm going to spend a little more time on the beginning because it's important for everything else that happened. Women had to have a degree, men didn't. They had to have a GED. They got paid more money than we did. We couldn't take promotion exams, so we couldn't go up in the ranks. We couldn't be transferred out of the women's division. We were closeted in this little role. And I'm the only one that got out. And once I did get out, the other women wanted to get out too. And they asked me how I did. And I said, well, you just go tell the mayor that you know,
you're going to sue him.
That didn't work a second time. So we finally decided to take on the issues, this group of women. And this is one thing that was important through my whole career. The group of women, those 18 women that were there, a lot of them are quite on the elderly side. They'd been there for years. It was an easy job. And they didn't want things to change. But a lot of us were young too, about half of us
Mhm.
young, and we wanted to get out in uniform. We wanted to go be real police officers, as the officers would say. Women aren't real police officers. And so we got together and we made an agreement that we were going to take on every blockage that's keeping us from being complete police officers. And we're all going to do it together. And if you don't want to do it with us because you're afraid of what's going to happen to you or something, just remain silent.
Mhm.
And they did. And so I said, just, I'm single. I don't have to worry about what my husband's going to think or anything. So I'll be the spokesperson and we're going to go for it. And so we did. And not one of them gave in. Even the older women who were probably in their 60s at that time, they would threaten to put them out on walking beats. And the women were scared,
Mhm.
but they wouldn't back down. And so we took on every issue in that police department that was about discrimination, and we got them all changed.
That's amazing.
Took 8 years, did it. And by doing that, it broke open the promotion system. And if you're creative, in order to get the promotion system opened up, they will put out a notice about what the requirements are for promotion. So let's say for detective, you have to be able to think logically and do this and that and spend long times on the phone. And I don't, that's just silly, but, and they would say, who is this job open to? And it would say patrol officers.
Mm.
And we weren't patrol officers, we're
Right.
women. Patrol men is what it said. So I went to city council and asked them to change the name of patrol officer and police woman to police officer.
Mhm.
And this was in the early 70s. And the mayor was a woman at the time, and she just kind of giggled at me and she says, what is this, women's lib? I go, mm-hmm. And so they all unanimously passed it. They had no idea what they had just done. They had just opened the entire promotion system to women.
Yeah.
And so the next time a job was announced and it said, who can apply? It said, excuse me, police officer.
Yeah.
And so a whole bunch of us went in and took the exam and they had a fit. But it shows you how you don't have to be rabid screaming in the streets, tearing off your bra, feminist. You just have to be smart.
Mhm.
You figure out what's holding you back. And it's usually a stupid rule somewhere. And so you tack that rule and then you get what you want. So as I worked my way up through the ranks, it was hard because the men didn't want you there. So the men said, you're going to ruin the pension. You're going to get out here on the street. You're going to get hurt. And then you're going to go off on pension, disability, and you'll ruin the pension system. And if we go to a family beef together, you'll take the woman's side. And then, then we'll have us fighting plus the family beef fighting. And if my wife sees what you look like, then she's going to get mad at me. And then I'm going to have problems at home. And it was just all of these crazy things, And even the new mayor, there was a new mayor and his name was Neil Goldschmidt. And he eventually became, I think it was Secretary of Transportation for Jimmy Carter. He was young. He was going to make Leo the new chief of police. And he made a lot of promises to me before he got elected, if I would help work for him and get him elected, that he would take care of all the problems with the women. He never did. Never answered my phone calls, never responded to my memos or anything. And we had a requirement that you had to be 5'10" to be a police officer. Well, there are not a whole lot of 5'10" women out there. At least there weren't at the time.
How tall are you?
Have weight incommensurate with your height on the men's scale.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'7".
Okay.
And most of the women were in that
Right.
the height range. And even if we found a couple of women that were 5'10", but they didn't weigh what 5'10" men weighed.
Yeah.
So we were just blocked. We had to get rid of that height requirement. And so I wrote memos to the mayor and he wouldn't answer them. Nothing was happening. So I asked the Civil Service Board to have a hearing on the height requirement, what it should be. And so the newspaper found out about the hearing and they came and interviewed me. And they said, so how does the mayor feel about this? And I said, I don't know, he won't talk to me. And I said, but I'm going up there and I'm going to convince them to put it at 5'10". Put it at do away with the height requirement and go weight commensurate with height. And, you know, in good physical shape. And the mayor read the headlines in the paper the next day.
I bet you got a call.
Oh, I got a personal visit. I was in the records division talking to the commander of the records division when all of a sudden the mayor walks in. Commander out of his own office and says, I need to talk to her. Get out of the office. And the commander goes, and he runs out. And the mayor starts screaming at me, you know, how dare I hold a press conference? How dare I say these things? How dare I say that he wouldn't respond to me? I said, have you? Well, I haven't had time. And I go, oh, okay. But you haven't responded, right? No. And he says, but this is a stupid idea. He said, because you're going to ruin the pension system. Wives are going to get mad at you because you're working with their husband. All the stuff I'd been hearing all these years, it was coming from me. And I was trying to reason with him and I was trying to show him studies that had been done other place and he would not listen. And so finally, I have a little bit of a temper from time to time. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's you and I go outside. He said, if a man doesn't want to be arrested, there's nothing a woman can do to arrest him unless they have to shoot him. And I said, oh, that's ridiculous. He said, you and I, let's go outside. And if I can't get you in handcuffs in a minute, then I'll shut up and go away. Are you threatening me? You know, and he's screaming at me and you can hear him all through the building. And I said, no, I'm just trying to prove to you that women can do the job. And he storms out of the office. And he goes down the hall to where Leo's office was. And because he knew Leo and I were in a relationship. And he said, you better get her under control. There's no chance of that. So the next morning, when I was going up to the Civil Service Board, I got a call from the mayor's office and said he was going to be there and support eliminating the height requirement. Wow.
What do you think happened?
Yeah, it just, you know, I just have this issue of fairness. What's fair and, you know, what's just, and I'll fight to the death for it, you know, but it just wasn't fair. And I thought, well, if he's going to fire me, I guess Leo's going to have to take care of me. You know? I'll have to go find another job. Maybe I'll run for mayor. And so, anyway, he went up there and they did away with the height requirement.
Wow.
And it taught me that if you really stand firm for what you believe in, and you really have the law on your side or right on your side, fairness, justice, you can do it. And that was the rule that guided me my whole career. And every time they would, so then the thing was, okay, this woman is a problem. So let's put her where she'll fail, and then we can fire her. And so they'd give me every crappy job on the police department, and I'd do just fine at it, you know. And what that did for me is it taught me everything I needed to know about the police department. I knew that place inside and out. So as time goes by and we need a new chief, because the last one has had a heart attack. And by this time, Leo was also no longer living. He committed suicide out of sheer frustration.
Wow.
And where was I going?
He said they needed a new police chief.
Oh, and so I applied for police chief. And the community by this time was used to seeing women police officers. And they got behind me, and they were buying billboards and putting them up, you know. We want Penny as our chief police. Excuse me, we're gonna have to do a little editing here.
No problem.
And I went through a process, and the mayor elected me, or appointed me as police chief.
Same mayor?
Oh,
was
no.
it the same mayor?
No, he was gone by then. He was on to bigger and better things. No, this mayor owned a tavern, and he'd never been in politics before. And his name was Bud Clark. And there was a very famous poster in Portland. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it shows a man in a raincoat with his back to the camera, and he's got his pant legs rolled up, and he's wearing this raincoat, and he's holding it open like this, exposing himself to a nude woman statue. And it says, "Expose yourself to art." That was Bud Clark. And he was a character, and twinkly eyes. He looked like Santa Claus, you know. And he just charmed the stuffing out of people, and they loved him. They loved the way he talked and the ideas he had and all of it. So he wanted to break the culture in the police department. And he said he had, you know, really looked at it, studied it. He wanted to put someone in that would change it, but he said he didn't know how you possibly could because it was so embedded in the police department. But then when he would talk to me and I would tell him how I thought things could be done, he thought I could do it. And I got it going. And so in policing, the mayor, or there's always somebody above the police chief, might be a police commission or the mayor or something like that. I reported to the mayor, and he said the things he wanted done. He wanted the burglary rate reduced because we were the #1 burglary city in the country. Mm-hmm. It's not okay. And he wanted the officers and the community to get along better. So I found a burglary prevention program in Salt Lake City that chief had set up, and it was a truancy program because most of our burglaries were being committed during the day when everybody was at work, and truants were out of school, ripping houses, you know. Mm-hmm. So we set up a program to return them to school, and the school agreed to keep them and not expel them. And we notified the courts of the kids we were picking up for burglary, the juvenile courts. And they agreed to work with the families and get them the help they needed. And the burglary rate fell to the bottom, and just
Wow.
like 6 months. We were like the fourth from the bottom of all the big cities in the country.
Wow.
And so he was really happy about that. And I was doing other things too. I made my policies really clear, what I expected from the officers, put it in writing, went out and talked to all roll calls. And I said that I wouldn't tolerate excessive force. I wouldn't tolerate being rude or disrespectful to the community. And I wouldn't tolerate lying. The chief before me had 8 levels of truthfulness. I had 1.
Either it's true or it's not.
Yeah, exactly. And so then I don't know why it all happened, but everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I'd been chief like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And the mayor called me in and said, we have to cut your budget by 10%. Police budget is all people. Now, there's nothing else in a police budget except cars for the people.
Mm-hmm.
And that means I had to lay off people. Police officers have been laid off in anyone's memory. So it's my fault.
Right.
It wasn't my fault. I just got there. And then 2 months later, I got another budget cut and had to lay off more police officers. And plus I had to annex part of the county and take over policing in this big area of the county with less officers.
Mm.
So things were all stirred up. And then the police accidentally killed a black man there was a fight in a black commercial area at a gas station, and they went to break up the fight, and a off-duty security guard saw the fight, went over to help the gas station owner. The police thought he was the bad guy. They put a carotid hold on him, which is they put the elbow. They put the guy's chin in the elbow and press on both sides of the neck where the carotid arteries are, and you go down. Lead, piece of lead. And he died. And he was a vet. He had 5 children. He was a security guard, never been in any trouble in his life. And the community went nuts. He was black. And so I was really in a bind then, because the officers were doing what they'd been taught to do by for us chief. And I hadn't had time to get in and change anything yet. And so I had to support the officers in what they'd been taught to do, but it wasn't the right thing to do. And so I had to convince the community that, yes, that was wrong. They'd had the wrong training and all of that. I would fix it. But there wasn't anything I could do to bring that man back to life. Right. So we got sued, and we deserved it. And then a few months later, there was a crazy man who was, he was a black man who was mentally unstable in an extra care situation. And he went into a bar where mostly Native Americans hung out, started calling them all kinds of names and saying he was going to come back and shoot them all. And, they called in from the bar when he left to go get his gun. And the woman who worked the district recognized who he was and went to his house. And he started shooting at her. And so there was a elderly, an 80-some-year-old woman that took in these mentally unstable personalities and would give them a home. And she got paid for it, of course. And she called the police from her house and said, he's drinking. He's probably going to fall asleep drunk. And I'm okay. And so then he'd open the front door, walk out of the porch and shoot, run in the house, run through the house, open the back door, because they lived on a corner, and he'd go out that way and shoot. So the officers, we got a whole bunch of officers there, they're all being shot at. And we have a new captain and a new lieutenant in that precinct. And the captain decides he's going to go home because he's tired of being there. And they called the SWAT team in, but the SWAT team hadn't arrived yet. And so the new lieutenant is now in charge because it's like 3 a.m, the captain's gone home. They've cut off all the electricity to the house and everything, so he can't watch TV or anything like that, the bad guy. And he comes out on the front porch. So the lieutenant gives an order. He says, if anybody feels they're in danger, shoot back. Comes out on the front porch, he fires a shot. Officer outside decides he's in danger. He shoots back. Unbeknownst to anybody, he gets the guy right between the eyes and the guy falls down dead. But they can't see that because the electricity's off. And then they see somebody running through the house to the back door, and they think it's him out to shoot. I get on the back porch, and it's the grandmother trying to escape.
Oh, goodness.
And she doesn't die right away, and she's laying there crying and screaming because she's hurt. And finally, one of the officers just runs up and grabs her, picks her up, and puts her in the ambulance, but she died. It was July. It was hot, and we were on the verge of a riot, and I knew it. I could. And so I just went out and set up a meeting in the neighborhood at a school, and went out and to talk to the people. And they had Portland has these young people that every time there's any kind of a protest, they go to the local can't think of what you call it, where they kill animals, and they take heads and put them on sticks, and they march around with them and saying, police are pigs. And so they were there, and the room was packed. It was hot as can be. And I was out there for hours that night answering questions. And when I finished and was leaving, they gave me a standing ovation.
Wow.
And it was because I went out and faced them. And, a lot of times when things go on, as you see on the police, on the TV, police chiefs sometimes hide. Don't want to come out there, and if they do come out, they won't tell you anything. And I thought, I work for these people. I'm here to make sure that they are receiving the proper kind of police care. And so I was always out in the community. And so they were, even though there was a march, it wasn't against the police. Well, it was against the police, but it wasn't against me, because they were carrying signs around the police station. A whole bunch of people out marching and saying, Penny, help us. Penny, please protect us. Don't let them kill us. I'm going, oh God.
That's a lot on your shoulders.
Yeah. But I was so glad that it wasn't Chief Harrington get those monsters under control or something like that. It was, they recognized I was doing what I could to get them the kind of police service they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And the union hated what I was doing. As they kept saying, you're caving into the blacks, you're caving into the Hispanics, you're caving in. If I did anything to help the community, I was caving in. And they were getting the police officers, trying to get the police officers riled up against me. So I guess that the reason I wanted to tell you the story is that if you're going to go into a field that is not used to having women, you're not going to act like the men in that field. It's women have their own ways of behaving and doing things. As a group, we tend to talk a lot. We tend to try and make people understand. And we tend to try and de-escalate violence. And those were all the values I was trying to plug into that police department.
Right.
All officers acted like that.
Right.
When the first man died of the chokehold, 2 police officers went out and had T-shirts made that said, "Don't choke them, smoke them," and it had a smoking gun on it. And they smoked them in the police station parking lot.
Oh, wow.
And I find out about it from the news. The reporters were calling me going, "Why are they selling?"
Oh, boy.
So I fired the guys that had the T-shirts made, and I gave a letter of discipline to everybody that bought one.
Yeah.
They were like throwing fuel on the fire that I was trying to.
Absolutely.
And
right.
And they didn't like that very well. And they were being held responsible. And other chiefs wouldn't do it because they knew they wouldn't be popular.
Well, and I think it's a little bit of maybe the inaction in your predecessors is a little bit of the boys will be boys attitude.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's true. And there's in policing especially, and I don't know how it is in your field, but in policing, you don't tell on a bad boy that's one of your compatriots, one of the people you work with. Because if you do, then you're the rat and you will never get cover on a call. You'll be out there all by yourself when you need help. Nobody's going to come help you. And
I think there has been a lot of that in orthopedics as well, although fortunately, I think that things are changing and have changed a lot, but that was there for a long time.
Yes. Yeah. And we all saw that in the O.J. Simpson, in the Rodney King, they'd all clump together for each other or whatever.
Right.
And I just don't do that. And you have to be strong enough if you're going to go into one of these professions to do what you know is right and be true to your own code of honor, and have a feeling I've talked way too long already.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm fascinated by your story.
Okay. You're going to be able to edit this, right?
We can, but I love listening to your story. This is amazing.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, so just to kind of fast forward through the rest of my life, I wound up getting fired as chief. And not because I did anything wrong, but because I did things that were acceptable
Right.
to the white male, and I totally mean this, white male power structure. So the union hated me. Most of the officers there really liked what I was doing. And they wanted clear direction. They knew that I would support them, as long as that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And so my second husband was a police officer. And he worked in the personnel division at the time. And he had a friend where he hung out at his bar. It was called Rickshaw Charlie's. And this was a Chinese man named Bobby Lee. And Bobby Lee always was looking for a way to make money. And Gary took me into Rickshaw Charlie's one night, and there were all these leather coats hanging behind the bar. I go, "Why do you have leather coats behind the bar?" And he said, "Got a good deal on them. Do you need a leather coat?" No, I don't need a leather coat. But he would do that kind of thing. He would get a good deal on something, and then he'd sell it behind the bar. Unfortunately, one time he got a good deal on some cocaine.
Oh.
Yeah. And he was letting drug dealers hang out in the bar. And so Gary went in there one night and saw that and told him, that guy's a really bad guy. He's a drug dealer. You better get him out of here. You shouldn't let him hang out here. And Gary asked him, he said, have the drug officers been in to see you? And Bobby says, no. What should I do if they come in? And Gary says, well, keep that guy out of here. And then if you just tell them everything you know, but don't let that guy hang out in here. Okay, fine, I won't. So 2 nights later, the drug officers go on. And they're interviewing him, and he's telling them all the information he knows about this man. And they're thanking him, he's being so helpful. And he said, oh, that's okay. Gary Harrington told me you'd be coming. And this was an undercover drug operation, and nobody was supposed to know about it. And so they went to the DA and told the DA that Gary knew about the undercover drug operation and warned Bobby Lee he was being looked at. Well, those last 2 things were not true. He didn't know there was an undercover drug. He knew that there was a big undercover drug operation going on involving that guy. He didn't know it also involved Bobby Lee. Mm-hmm. And he also didn't tell Bobby Lee anything except cooperate with the cops,
right.
Get that guy out of there and cooperate with the cops. So the DA brings charges against my husband.
Oh boy.
For, get this, not following the orders of his commanding officer, because I told him not to go in there.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm going, oh God.
Oh boy.
They looked at my husband and implied that he and I were both involved in drug dealing. Anybody that knows me knows that I am death on drugs, and that there's just no way I would ever do that. And so the DA writes me a letter and says we couldn't find anything that he did that was criminally wrong, but we're suggesting you charge him with failing to obey your orders by not going in there. And I said, what if I tell him to take out the garbage and he won't? Are you going to bring him up on charges of not listening to his commanding officer? This is stupid, And I said he was trying to do the right thing. Oh no, they make it all in the press and everything. Oh yeah, you think he's involved. We just can't prove it. And then the union starts this thing about how drugs are overrunning Portland because I reorganized the drug enforcement process. And I did, because the drug unit had gone bad a few years before, and we're planting drugs on people, and we're stealing drugs and selling drugs and lying on search warrants. And most of them, they all got fired, and some of them went to jail. And so I wasn't going to have that same situation. So I upgraded them to a higher level in the department so that they were under closer supervision. And anyway, people knew I wouldn't get involved in anything like that. But the union just churned it and churned it and churned it because they were so angry at me for taking on bad officers. So then the mayor gets told that so I'm supposed to investigate my own husband. So I'm not going to do that. Nobody's going to believe that.
Right.
So I assign an internal investigator to the mayor, and he can work directly for the mayor, and he can investigate my husband on violating my orders. So the mayor, then the union goes to the mayor and says, you won't be fair investigating him because she's your person. And so, you'll just let him off. And this is their own union member that they're not representing.
Right.
And so the mayor says he appoints a retired U.S. attorney to investigate the allegations against my husband. And the retired U.S. attorney says, I'd like my friend, the retired U.S. judge, to join me on this. So, two of us will look at it. And then somebody that is close to the union says, let's put it on television. Let's have it live on television.
Oh, gosh.
So I think it was for a month, every day, it was the investigation of Chief Penny Harrington running live on television. And nothing came out that looked at all suspicious or, it was clear I didn't do anything wrong. But then they decided that they needed a third person who had some policing experience, and they brought in the assistant director of the state police to talk about my reorganization of the police department. And he didn't know anything about that because they do traffic, basically. And I've got this big, huge police department I'm running. They didn't know what they were talking about. So, and then at the end, they decided to hold secret testimony that I would not be allowed to come to, nor would my attorney. And they were going to bring in, and they did bring in, all the police officers that had been in the drug unit that I had kicked out because I raised the qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
Them talk about me quietly behind closed doors, and I never knew what they said. It was a kangaroo court. It was awful. And then they issued a report that said that even though I didn't do anything wrong, that I had lost the ability to control the department, and that I needed to be replaced. So they fired me, and they recommended that my husband get 25 days off for not listening to his commanding officer. But he was off on disability, and he was a wreck because of what he had caused me, And I didn't even get angry I was angry at him. Yeah, I yelled at him for a day, and then I go, okay, that's enough. It was a stupid thing that you did, but I know you didn't do it. I know you did it for all the right reasons,
Right.
So I didn't hold it against him. And the mayor told me to take 90 days off and then decide what I was going to do, because he didn't really fire me. He said, I want you to step down and be an assistant chief. I said, are you kidding? I don't think so. And so I just didn't go back. I was on disability for a year, and then they took me off disability. And I moved to California. And then here's the interesting part. I thought I was done forever. I thought, boy, I will never have a career, anything like this again. And I went to California. I got hired by the California State Bar that controls attorneys in California. They have, at that time, we had 35,000 attorneys in California, and the State Bar licenses them, investigates them. I was the assistant in charge of investigating attorneys, and boy, did I get my eyes open. There are a lot of crooked attorneys out there. But at the same time, they had fired the chief of the LAPD. And so people were approaching me and wanting me to put my name in for chief of LAPD. I go, crazy. Been there, done that. Not going to do that again.
Wow.
And I wouldn't even think about taking on something that big and that ingrained. And so then the police commission, which runs the LAPD, the chief reports to the police commission, brought me in as an advisor to the police commission on everything, on policies, on cases, and wow, all of a sudden, I'm in high demand down there for working on issues involving issues involving the LAPD. And this was right after the Rodney King beating. And it was also, no, it wasn't, it was before the O.J. Simpson thing. So I met a woman who became very important in my life. Her name was Kathy Spiller, and she was the executive director of the Feminist Majority Foundation. And the State Bar loaned me out to the LAPD and the LA Police Commission and a place that needed help with really thorny issues, because it brought them good advertising. Look at this nice State Bar. They let their people come out and work for free. So, but it was okay. It was fun, challenging. I liked it. And I worked for the State Bar for about 7 years. And then Kathy Spiller finally convinced me to come to work for the Feminist Majority and set up something called the National Center for Women in Policing. And to take on the issues that we had taken on in the LAPD. We wrote a big report about all the things the LAPD need to do to clean up discrimination in the LAPD, to have appropriate training and all of that kind of thing. And so we made 700 and some recommendations, because we saw that if you just said, this is what you have to look at, they never would look at it. But if you gave them things that the police commission could say, how about number 257? What have you done about that? You know, they had to. So we did that. So, and I finally decided, okay, I will go with the Feminist Majority and set up this organization. And it was another really good move on my part. And the State Bar and the Feminist Majority, the National Center for Women Policing, were what really, really made my career. And the National Center for Women in Policing, it was during the time Bill Clinton was president,
Mhm.
and his whole administration was very friendly to anything about women's issues. We won't say anything more about Bill and women's issues. Um, so they gave us lots of money. And so I was able to write a book about how to recruit and retain women in law enforcement,
Mhm.
which got sent out to every police department in the country. And I got grant money to develop a training program on how to investigate sexual assault.
Mhm.
And because police departments weren't doing a very good job, they'd say, well, what were you wearing? You went to a bar alone?
Right.
All this. And so we developed a protocol for investigating sexual assault. And then Janet Reno brought me in and asked me to help look for good recruiting programs to recruit women and men into policing. And I did that for a while. And then the US Department of Justice would send me out to trouble spots. And this is while I'm working as head of the National Center, but I'm
Mhm.
working sort of like undercover for the US Department of Justice, going out and and it was an exciting time. I spent half my time in Washington, D.C. I was called before the U.S. Civil Rights Commission several times to testify. Um, it was a whirlwind, and I became the expert on women in policing in this country, and that's the way I would be introduced. The
Mhm.
foremost expert on women's issues in policing. I went, wow, from being fired as a chief to being the foremost expert. And then finally, I got tired of, I was there for 7 years and I had everything pretty much accomplished I wanted to accomplish. So I decided I was going to quit. And then I started getting calls from police departments and from lawyers and wanting to hire me to come in and help them with problems or to testify in court on cases. And the first one that wanted to hire me was the LA Fire Department, who the fire chief had just gotten fired because his training academy had made a video of women firefighter trainees not being taught properly,
Mm.
and all the crazy, stupid mistakes they'd make, dropping ladders and they played it at roll calls. And so, of course, word got out, and
Mhm.
the chief got fired, and the new chief gets selected, and he's called me. He says, you're the first call I'm making. I want to hire you. I need you to come help me. I don't want to put my hide on the wall like the last chief. He said,
No one wanted you to take a break.
yeah, yeah. And so I worked for him, and my son this time, by this time I'd become a lawyer. And so I told him that I was going to be doing both. The feminist majority agreed that I could take that job with the fire department because they wanted the fire department cleaned up too, with more women in and everything.
Mhm.
And so I was making $35 an hour at the feminist majority. And so the fire chief wanted to know how much I'd charge him. And I thought, I don't know. And I said, how about $50 an hour? And he said, okay, fine. And I told my son, and my son goes, "Are you crazy?" He said, "You should have asked for $150 an hour." And I go, "Oh, that's unheard of." He says, "No, Mom, it's what experts get." And so anyway, I did the fire training. I taught them how to investigate cases and all of that. And that was really interesting. I enjoyed working with them a lot. And then finally I thought, okay, now I'm ready to retire. Moved to the coast in California and retire. And then my phone starts ringing off the hook.
Of course.
As an
I'm sorry, you cut out for just a moment. Can you repeat that? You cut out for just a moment. Can you repeat that? All of a sudden you started getting calls after you moved to the coast.
I don't think my earphones are working right. Yes, I said that after I retired and moved to the beach here in California, I started getting calls from attorneys all the time wanting to hire me to be an expert on cases of discrimination, race and gender discrimination, and mostly in police agencies, some in fire agencies. And then I had some in places like insurance agencies and people who would find out about me. And so I was traveling all over the country. And it's a lot of work being an expert witness. I mean, you've got to review every document in the case and write a big report. And then you got to lie there and testify and remember all that stuff. And I just got so tired. But my son, as soon as I started this, he said, "Okay, I'm going to write your retainer agreement so you don't so you're not working for free."
Right.
He said he made it $350 an hour to review cases, $2,000 to testify in court, and all this. And I'm going, "Oh, nobody's going to pay that." Of course, they would pay it. You pay it. And he says, "You have to realize you are the expert in the United States on this issue." And I never quite got my head around that. And so I did it for a while, and then I go, "Okay, I'm done.
Do you think
I've got to do something else? I cannot keep doing this really hard work."
I'd like to ask you, do you think in setting your rates, because I think one of the things that women often do is they undervalue themselves, and do you think that's what was going on when you set your rates?
Exactly. I was. And it took my own son to tell me that. You just don't have any idea how valuable you are. And he said, "I'm going to be your manager." And I go, "Yeah, charge me for that." So my son said, "I'm going to write your retainer agreement and you give it to attorneys just the way I write it." He says, "I'm going to set your rates. We're going to start at $350 an hour. Then we're going to go to $500 an hour. Then we're going to go to $1,000 an hour." And I'm going, wait. And I couldn't keep up with the work.
Yeah.
It was just too much. And so anyway, I finally told my son, I said, "Okay, I'm really quitting this time. I'm tired. I'm old. I want to quit." And he said, "No, you're making a lot of money. You have to keep going." I go, "No, I don't." And I quit. And he just couldn't believe that I would walk away from, that kind of money and prestige and everything. I said, "It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter." And so when I lived in LA, I met a whole bunch of crazy women that were into alternative healing and into what I used to call woo-woo. But and I was suffering in my health, because I was just wearing myself out. And so I couldn't seem to get well. And a friend took me to this little healing center. And they were introducing me to all kinds of things like crystals and vitamins and essential oils. And I got better. I thought, wow, this is good. So when I moved here to Morro Bay, I opened up a crystal shop. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
my so we go from top cop in the nation to owner in Morro Bay, little old Morro Bay.
Okay, so what's the name of your crystal shop?
It's called Ruby Dragon.
Ruby Dragon. All
And
right.
I started it when my son, in the meantime, was in a committed relationship. They had a child named Anya, and she's a redhead and beautiful blue eyes and red hair and loves her grandma. And so I built a house for them next door. And they moved here. They lived over in the Central Valley of California, which is, it's where a lot of crops and things are grown, but the air is so bad from the chemicals.
It's hot and it's dusty.
Yeah, every time I would visit them, they would all be coughing.
Oh,
And I thought, I got to get them out of here.
yeah.
And so I convinced my son it was time for him to start his own law practice. And Simone, the mom, was a PhD and was teaching at a university in Fresno. But she could do that on the computer, or she could also go there for a day or two and leave the baby with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked out just great for a number of years. And it was so much fun to. Anya moved in when she was 3 years old next door. And she fell in love with her grandma, and her grandma fell in love with her, you know. And we would do things like we would play all kinds of games, and she'd watch Barney and that. But we'd also play games like, you be the judge. And so I'd tell her about a crime brief. This man, he was walking down the street one day and he was mad, and he took his car keys and he scratched a big X in somebody's car. What do you say, Judge? And she'd say, guilty. And I'd say, what's the penalty? 50 years in jail. And I go,
she's harsh.
but I introduced her to law enforcement and, you know, different things
Yeah.
that got her thinking.
Right.
Crystals. She could feel the energy of crystals. She knew which crystals were which ones and all of that. And then my crystal shop started to grow. And I had bought this small building it was a condo in a retail center, and 600 square feet. And I thought, this will be cute. I taught her how to run the cash register and, you know, on customers and all of that. And she was loving it. And then it became so popular that other people wanted to come and be there as, you know, Reiki teachers and massage therapists, and they wanted a healing center. So I had to rent a place. I went from 600 square feet to 2,700 square feet.
Oh boy.
Had all these people in there working, and then I started, after the first thing that happened was that my son developed brain cancer.
Mm.
And it was really horrible. And when he went to the hospital the first time with these symptoms, and they found the tumor, and they said, you've got 6 months to live.
Oh, wow.
That was the most horrible thing ever.
Yeah.
And I said, don't let anybody put an expiration date on you.
Yeah.
are not going to die in 6 months or a year. You are going to live. And so he just ignored me. He said, you don't know anything about, medicine. You don't know anything about brain tumors. And I said, I know you. And I know you are not going to die. Not now, not for a long time. He lived for 6 years.
Wow.
And it was a miracle. It was just a miracle. And then he did die. And in the meantime, the mom got colon cancer.
Oh my goodness.
So I've got this little girl that I'm trying to keep. She was terrified. Both of her parents are dying.
Yeah.
And she's just a baby. And so I had her at my house as much as I could, but yet I wanted her to spend time with her parents too when they were feeling up to it and not, really, really, really sick. And so somehow we made it through that. My son died in October of 2015. My brother died in December of 2015.
Oh my goodness.
The mom died in April of 2016. And just before she died, she moved to Truckee and took her daughter and let her brother adopt. And so that was a horrible
hard time. Yeah.
And now I'm at a stage where I have to decide, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? It was real exciting for a long time. I'd go, wow, because it was like everything fell into place. I really felt that I was put on this earth to try and fix policing, and they're writing another book about me right now. And it was such an amazing thing. And then I went through some health problems this year due to an abscessed tooth. Well, not this year, but last year. And I thought, I've got to stop. Somehow I've got to stop and just be. And that's what and then the COVID virus came along. Thank God I didn't get that. And, but my business closed down because we can't have anybody in there,
Right.
And so it's now I'm at a place in my life where I'm trying to figure out what next.
What the next chapter is.
Give myself, does it have to be something else? Can't you just be now? No, I don't know what's going to happen next.
Well, I wonder if either at some point you'll become restless and you'll look for that next thing, or someone else is going to decide that for you and the phone calls will come.
It kind of happens that way.
It seems to throughout your lifetime. Well, I would like to ask you, if you've given our listeners so many pieces and nuggets of advice already, but if you had to give one final piece of advice to a young woman or girl who wants to just follow their dreams, and even if it's in a male-dominated field, what would that be?
I have to move and plug in again because my
okay, no problem.
my computer's getting low on battery.
Take your time.
Hold on 1 second. Got my Okay.
Okay.
Now I'm hooked up again.
Wonderful. So if you had to give one piece of advice to women who want to either go into law enforcement or even in any field that is very male dominated, what would that one piece of advice be?
First of all, when you pick out what you want to do, make sure it's something that makes your heart happy, and not because you're going into a particular field because you want to make a lot of money. Or in fact, I had this conversation with my granddaughter just recently, and I said, she's a junior now in high school. And I said, have you decided what you're going to do after high school? And she says, yes, I'm going to go to college and study computer coding. I go, why? She said, because you can make a lot of money. And I said, fortunately for you, you don't have to, because your dad left you money and I have money. And I said, if you could do anything you wanted to do, what would you do? And she says, write. I want to be a writer and I want to be an editor. I want to take people's work and help them make it better. And I go, okay. I said, that makes your heart happy, huh? And she said, yes, it does. She says, I hate computer coding. And so the first thing is pick something that makes your heart happy.
Right.
Because if you don't, you're just going to be miserable. And
Yep.
What's the point of that? And also learn as much as you can about the field that you're going into, not so that you can step out and be in uniform and be a police officer one day, because they're going to teach you how to be a police officer. But they're going to teach you how to be a police officer as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to have the moral strength to look at that and say, okay, I understand what you're telling me, and I'm going to do it. Since I'm on probation, I'm going to do it the way you tell me to do it. But the minute I get off probation, I'm going to do it the way I think it would be better.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to make changes. A lot of people won't make changes or won't tell when something's wrong. And if you don't have the courage or the spine to stand up and say, this is wrong, something needs to be done here, then you shouldn't be in that field. Excuse me. Be an allergist.
Exactly, right?
But yeah, and the other thing is to make friends with people that are in the field already and build yourself some mentors. Because when I went into policing, there were probably 2% women in policing in the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all in women's divisions. And this book that's being written right now, that is featuring me, it's called Seven Fabulous Leaders or something. It's not fabulous, but it talks about the fact that going into a career that there are no women there, or very few women, is that you have to be strong enough to stand up for yourself to start with, but also to help other women as they come in and to stay true to what you know is right. And I have seen so many people come into policing and get sucked into the old boy culture.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and drink after work every night. That's what we have to do. You don't do that. You you stay true to yourself and to your family, and don't get sucked into the way things have always been done.
Right. Right. Well, I think we'll all be looking forward to the latest book about you. But if our listeners want to keep up with what you're doing, what's a good way for them to do that?
Well, there's I do have a website, but there's nothing on it because I didn't want people to want to hire me anymore. And, but to keep up with me, the best thing to do is to go to www.rubydragoncrystals.com, and it's my work website, and it not only has all my crystals on it, it has all the people that work with me and what they do. It has like articles that we write about different things, about helping you stay healthy, stay balanced. I got to read those someday. So I'll be healthier. But yeah, that's probably the best way. Or you can Google me. I mean, you Google me, it'll give you plenty to read.
Absolutely. Well, Penny, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate hearing about everything that you have done and things that you have done for not just women in law enforcement, but women in general with the policies that you have created. And I appreciate you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Nancy. It's been wonderful. I love to hear myself talk.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much. And I think you have really demonstrated how I think a lot of women sometimes think, okay, my 20s, my 30s, this is when I really work on my career, but you have shown that through all different phases you've evolved and you've pivoted. And yeah, I think that's part of what kind of keeps us young and keeps us going.
I think so
I love
too.
that.
Yeah. And and I'm glad that this one isn't televised, because I haven't been able to get into my hairdresser for months.
Yeah, it's not televised. I may use little snippets here and there just on my YouTube channel, but people don't really go to that. This is ultimately it's primarily an audio. It'll be an audio podcast. So,
good. I will
I
get you the bio today.
Perfect.
And
Perfect.
As to the picture, I do have a picture of me in uniform as a chief. That's a headshot,
I would love that.
Okay, I will send that.
Whichever one you feel is good. I'll take it.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Stay
Thank you,
well.
Nancy.
Enjoy the ocean breezes.
I will.
All right.
Okay.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.